It started as most betrayals do, with a smile. Vincent Archer stood at the head of the polished oak conference table in our glass-walled boardroom, sleeves rolled to his elbows like some tech-world prophet, charming and polished and completely full of it. He was pitching our analytics platform to a roomful of investors like he'd personally conjured it from thin air. I sat 2 seats down, laptop open, hands folded, lips pressed into a neutral line. I'd built that platform from scratch over 18 months of obsessive work. Late nights, mountains of coffee, and too many missed dinners to count. And yet here I was, watching him code it in buzzwords and sell it like snake oil. "My name is Marisol Vega," I should have said aloud. "I'm the reason this thing works." But I didn't. I sat quietly. I smiled when appropriate. Because that's what women like me do when the stakes are this high and the game is rigged. I'm 44 years old, Latina, and the lead data strategist at Silveridge Digital, a mid-size predictive analytics firm in Chicago's West Loop. I've been here 6 years. I've built more systems than I can count, mentored half the junior staff, and architected every line of the algorithm Vincent was now calling the future of financial modeling. And still I was being treated like a decorative extra at my own show. Across the table sat the investors. Serena DuPont from Meridian Capital, flanked by Jason Liu and Miranda Cortez, sharp, seasoned, and utterly unreadable. Serena had the look of someone who'd been pitched 100 revolutions this year alone. Her eyes scanned Vincent like a scanner running diagnostics. Vincent launched into a slide showing predictive clarity curves that looked, frankly, suspicious even to me. The model's forecast accuracy had somehow jumped from a documented 87% to a miraculous 98.3%. The confidence intervals were non-existent. No error margins. No notation. My stomach tightened. I'd written the technical overview myself last week. I had sent it to Vincent under the assumption he wanted to understand the system better. Instead, he'd cherry-picked the best-case outputs and slapped them into a deck with no context and plenty of glitter. "Using our proprietary engine," Vincent said, clicking to another slide that wasn't mine, "we're able to reduce forecasting latency to sub-100 milliseconds even under scaled deployment." My eyes narrowed. That wasn't just misleading, it was fiction. With our current architecture and cloud burst capacity, 200 to 300 milliseconds latency was typical under real-world concurrent load. Maybe 120 milliseconds on a good day. But Vincent said it with such conviction, such flawless confidence, that Jason Liu leaned forward. "Interesting," Jason said. "What kind of query load are you basing that on?" Vincent didn't blink. 10,000 concurrent financial data pulls per minute. At scale. My heart started to race, not because I was nervous, but as I was angry. 10,000 per minute at that latency? Absolutely impossible. The numbers didn't lie. But Vincent did, smoothly. Before I could say anything, Serena DuPont turned to me directly. "Marisol, could you walk us through the underlying assumptions? Particularly around system load and latency thresholds." There was no smile on her face. Just an expectation. A challenge. One I'd earned the right to meet. Vincent's neck stiffened. He smiled tightly and gestured toward me. "Of course. Marisol's here to support on technical details." "Of course," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "Happy to elaborate." I clicked to minimize the Zoom window and open my notes. I kept my eyes on Serena, not Vincent. Our benchmarks show consistent 86 to 88% accuracy under high-volume real-world datasets. In terms of latency, under full concurrent load, we average around 280 milliseconds. We've hit 210 on optimized weekends during batch processing. We're working toward sub-200, but that's not yet consistent. I paused. And we believe honesty in these numbers is what builds long-term credibility. Not marketing poetry. The silence that followed was subtle, electric. Jason scribbled something into his notebook. Miranda glanced at Serena, who only nodded once, thoughtfully, almost approvingly. Vincent didn't say anything. But I could feel the temperature drop beside me. The meeting continued awkwardly now. Vincent sidestepped a few more questions, deflecting most of the technical ones to me. Each time I gave clean, honest data. Each time I felt a little less invisible and a little more exposed. By the end of the hour, I knew two things with certainty. First, the investors weren't buying Vincent's exaggerations. And second, I'd just embarrassed him in front of 3 people who held the fate of our Series B round in their well-manicured hands. That was the moment I knew something was coming. Not today, but soon. Because men like Vincent don't forget. And they don't forgive. Especially when the truth makes them look small. The next morning, the Chicago sky hung heavy with rain, the kind that settles in before dawn and refuses to leave. A slow, soaking gray that mirrored exactly how I felt walking into the office. I stopped at Café Esperanza like I always did, little corner spot run by a Dominican couple who never asked for my name anymore. Just handed me my oat milk latte and wished me a better day than yesterday. I smiled, tight-lipped, nodded my thanks and ducked back into the wind. By the time I reached the 14th floor of the Silveridge building, my coat was damp and my mood worse. I made it to my office, the one I had earned through years of grit and goodwill, and shut the door behind me. It was early, maybe 8:10, but I needed the silence. I needed to breathe before whatever was coming landed. I set the coffee down, powered on my dual monitors, and stared at the familiar swirl of code waking up in front of me. There was my work. Every query. Every optimization. Every design pattern that had turned a clunky forecasting engine into a sleek, scalable system. I had built this platform when no one asked me to. I'd done it while managing a team, attending pitch meetings, coaching junior devs who barely knew what version control was. And while Vincent played visionary in expensive suits, I had stayed late, taken meetings from hospital waiting rooms when my mother was sick, and coded through holidays. It hadn't always been this way. When I joined Silveridge 6 years ago, we were 15 people squeezed into a WeWork space with IKEA desks and unreliable internet. I had come in on contract, desperate for something stable after a bitter layoff from a consulting firm that folded overnight. The job description was vague, but I knew one thing. The system they were building barely worked and they needed someone to make sense of the mess. I did that. In 3 months, I stabilized their analytics engine. In 6, I'd mapped out a roadmap for scalable architecture. In a year, I was leading their core data science efforts. Back then, Vincent was different. Still ambitious, yes, but hungry in a way that made him listen. He used to ask questions. He used to value technical clarity over showmanship. I remember the first time he stayed past 7 p.m. just to understand my neural vector simulation. That version of him is long gone. Now he was all elevator pitches and inflated KPIs. No nuance. No depth. Just style. My email pinged. Subject, performance check-in. From Vincent Archer. Time, 8:37 a.m. Message. Marisol, please stop by my office at 9. We need to debrief on yesterday's call. Vincent. Short. Clipped. And coming from a man who hadn't scheduled a one-on-one with me in over 5 months. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. There was the thing I'd been waiting for since I contradicted his fantasy numbers in front of 3 investors with Ivy League MBAs and billion-dollar portfolios. I stared at that message for a full minute before closing my eyes. 6 years of loyalty. And I already knew exactly what that meeting was about. Still, I pulled up the original documentation I'd sent him last week. Every benchmark, every line item, time-stamped and filed. I opened our internal Git repositories, highlighting key commits with my name. I even checked my patent application drafts for the modular predictive modeling I'd submitted through our legal team. Not because I thought I could stop what was coming, but because I wasn't going to let him pretend it hadn't happened. At 8:58, I smoothed my blazer, gathered my notebook and walked toward Vincent's office, past rows of glass-walled cubicles and hushed conversations. People were already glancing my way. They always do when something's about to happen. Vincent's assistant, Caleb, nodded toward the door without making eye contact. I knocked once. "Come in," Vincent called, his voice a bit too controlled. His office was all masculine elegance. Walnut desk, brass fixtures, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, and a single black and white photo of the Silveridge founding team, circa 2016. I was in that photo off to the side. I'd been photoshopped slightly darker. Not kidding. Vincent gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Marisol," he said, folding his hands like a therapist. "Let's talk about yesterday." And just like that, the knife began to slide in. Vincent didn't waste time with small talk. He never did when he was about to do something cruel. He leaned back in his chair, elbows on the armrests, hands forming that signature triangle under his chin. I'd seen this posture before, When he fired our UX lead for questioning a timeline, when he lowballed a new hire and called it budget creative, and when he took my team's client-facing model and rebranded it as his own on LinkedIn. Marisol, he said almost gently, I want to start by saying your technical knowledge is deeply respected. I said nothing. That tone, the soft one, the one people use when they're about to take something from you and pretend they're doing you a favor, was more insulting than if he'd shouted. But what happened yesterday in the investor call? He let the words trail off as if letting gravity do the work. I met his eyes. Steady. Calm. I'd trained for moments like this, not in school but in life. In rooms where the loudest man controlled the narrative and the quietest woman held the truth. You contradicted the projections I gave them, he said, his smile thinning. Directly. Publicly. You undermined my credibility. With respect, I said, my voice even, I clarified unrealistic expectations. They asked for numbers. I gave them hours. Vincent's jaw tightened. They asked me. And you passed the question to me. That's not the point, he snapped, the mask slipping for a second. Then he forced a breath through his nose and softened again. The point is cohesion. Alignment. We present a united front to investors. Even if it's fiction, I thought. Even if it's built on sand. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a folder. His movements were slow, practiced, almost ritualistic, like this moment had been prepared well in advance. I've decided, he said, that your strengths are being underutilized in your current role. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Effective immediately, you'll be reassigned as senior analyst within the data ops team. You'll report to Calvin Edmonds and your compensation will reflect the revised responsibilities. A reduction of $15,000 annually. He slid the folder across the table. I didn't open it. So this was the cost of integrity. $15,000 and a demotion. I see, I said quietly. My hands stayed folded. My voice didn't shake. Vincent smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just with that rehearsed corporate satisfaction like a dentist finishing a root canal. This isn't punitive, he said, almost sing-song. It's strategic. You're brilliant, Marisol. But yesterday proved that strategic communication isn't your strong suit. And what exactly is my strong suit? I asked softly. He didn't hesitate. Execution. You build. You code. You make things real. That's where I need you now, focused, head down, getting it done. Translation. Stay quiet. Do the work. Let me take the credit. I looked down at the folder, my name already typed on the reassignment form. Then I looked up. You're absolutely right, I said, nodding slowly. I think I did misread my role here. His smile widened a fraction, like he thought I'd just surrendered. I stood, gathered the unopened folder and said, thanks for the clarity. As I left his office, I could feel the stares begin to ripple through the bullpen. They'd heard. They always did. News like this spreads faster than fire and twice as hot. I returned to my office, still mine for now, and shut the door behind me. I stood there for a moment just looking at everything. The framed picture of my niece on the desk. The printed copy of my patent draft in the corner. The whiteboard with 3 unfinished model variations. The slight dip in the chair cushion where I'd sat and dreamed up everything Vincent just took credit for. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and began to back everything up. Designs. Email threads. Git commit history. Meeting notes. Architecture diagrams. All of it. Onto a secure encrypted drive. Not because I planned to make a move, but because now I knew I'd have to. This wasn't a detour. It was the start of something else. Something bigger than a job title. I had just finished labeling the final batch of files when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Local area code. I nearly ignored it. Probably a recruiter or worse, a client I wasn't allowed to speak to anymore. But something in me said, pick up. Hello. Pause. Then a cool, articulate voice on the other end of the line. Is this Marisol Vega? Yes. Who's calling? This is Serena DuPont. From Meridian Capital. We met yesterday during your company's presentation. The voice that had leveled the table with a single question now sliced through my quiet office like a violin string. I sat up straighter. Of course, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, professional. I didn't expect to hear from you directly. I hope this isn't an intrusion, she said smoothly. I was able to find your number in your company's online directory. I understand this may be an unusual outreach, but I wanted to follow up on a few technical details you mentioned. I glanced at the closed door, then at the hallway camera just outside. I lowered my voice. I'm happy to help if I can. I appreciate that, she said and paused just long enough to make me nervous. I also wanted to speak to you, off the record. There was. The tension shifted. The air changed. This was no longer about specs or queries per second. She continued, calmly but firmly. There were some discrepancies between what Mr. Archer presented and the details you provided. Frankly, it was clear to us that you understood the technology better than anyone else in the room, and it raised some internal questions on our end. I closed my laptop slowly. Every word she said felt like it echoed in the corners of my office. What kind of questions? I asked, keeping my tone light, controlled. Ones that relate to authorship, leadership, and, frankly, credibility, she said. We do our due diligence, Marisol. And your name shows up repeatedly, in public code commits, academic white papers, and provisional patents filed through the company. I swallowed hard. Those filings are part of the corporate IP. They belong to Silver Ridge. Yes, Serena agreed. But authorship is still authorship. We care very much about who's actually behind the technology we invest in. And based on what we've seen, we believe that person is you. Took everything in me not to react. I stared at the monitor in front of me, at my own face reflected back in the black glass. And for a long moment I said nothing. Are you asking me to confirm that? I'm asking whether you'd be open to meeting. Discreetly. In a neutral location. The last word hit with gentle precision. This woman did not waste syllables. I'd need to be very careful, I said. Vincent already. I understand, she cut in. We're not looking to jeopardize your position. We're looking to understand the truth. And possibly to protect it. That last part, protect it, hit me harder than I expected. Because no one in this company had ever tried to protect my work. Not even me, not really. Till now. I can meet, I said finally. Where? There's a coffee shop in River North, she said. Palmer and Pine. Quiet. No one from your building will be there. Of course she'd done her homework. Tomorrow, she asked. I checked my calendar. Thanks to Vincent. Tomorrow, I said. 9 a.m. I'll see you then. She hung up. And just like that the ground shifted beneath my feet. Not by much. But enough to notice. Someone saw me. Someone saw through him. And that meant for the first time since this started I wasn't alone. The next morning, Chicago was crisp and blue-skied, the kind of rare late winter day that almost tricks you into believing spring is near. I left my apartment early, wrapped in a navy coat and carrying nothing but my notebook and a phone that suddenly felt heavier than usual. Palmer and Pine sat on a quiet corner in River North, all glass walls and low jazz and ceramic mugs too nice to steal. I spotted Serena DuPont the moment I walked in. She was impossible to miss. Silver blonde hair in a French twist, tailored charcoal coat, black gloves folded neatly beside her Demoted cup. She didn't look up when I entered. She was reading. Unbothered. Like she was used to waiting for the world to catch up. I approached and only then did she glance up, with a warm but measured smile. Ms. Vega, she said, standing slightly. Thank you for coming. Marisol is fine, I said, taking the seat across from her. You always conduct due diligence over espresso? She smiled faintly. Only when the subject is worth it. A server approached. I ordered a black coffee because I needed clarity, not comfort. I'll be direct, Serena began. I've reviewed your system design notes from the investor deck. And separately, I've reviewed patent applications, Git repositories, code documentation, and internal white papers. Your fingerprints are everywhere. I said nothing. I also spoke with one of our technical consultants last night, she continued. He ran your model through a test environment based on the metrics you mentioned. Your version is accurate. Vincent's numbers are, at best, wildly optimistic. At worst, fraudulent. So I said nothing. I wanted to see where she would go. We're considering a $12 million investment in Silver Ridge, she said. But that investment depends on two things, the integrity of the product, and the integrity of the people running it. There was the opening. You're wondering whether I built it, I said. Serena leaned forward slightly. We're not wondering. The question is whether you're still in a position to lead it. Pause. I was demoted yesterday, I said calmly. Stripped of team access. Cut from product strategy. Vincent didn't like that I contradicted him in front of you. Serena's expression didn't change. But her eyes sharpened. And yet, she said, you still came here. Which tells me you're not done. I studied her for a moment. What are you proposing? We don't want to disrupt Silveridge. But we also won't invest in a product we can't verify, or in leadership that can't answer basic technical questions without deferring to the real expert. You want guarantees, I said. We want governance, she replied. If we move forward with the investment, it would be contingent on the creation of a chief technology officer role, reporting not to Vincent but to the board. I raised an eyebrow. That's not how Silveridge is structured. Then Silveridge will have to evolve, she said simply. Or it won't be funded. I exhaled slowly. And you want me in that role. We want the person who built the product to protect it. You're not just the lead engineer, Marisol. You're the reason we're even in this conversation. Vincent can pitch all day long. But without you there is no product. She let that settle between us for a beat. You'd have board oversight, she added. Equity compensation. Veto power on technical timelines. Contractual protection from dismissal. If Vincent objects, he can decline the deal. I stared down at my coffee. 6 years ago I would have laughed at this. 4 years ago I would have apologized for even being considered. But now I was tired of watching someone else wear the crown I forged with my own hands. What would you need from me? I asked. Documentation. Sign-off. Timeline assessments. Proof of authorship. Not that we need much more than what we already found. And discretion? She nodded. You'll remain anonymous in our process until the board meeting. After that, it's out in the open. I looked up at her and said the words before I could overthink them. I'm in. Her smile this time reached her eyes. Good, she said. Then let's build something real. By the time I returned to the office I had a list. A long, meticulous, forensic list. Emails. Code commits. Slack messages. Ticket threads. Drafts. Pull request notes. Calendar invites. Every breadcrumb that proved I hadn't just worked on the system. I was the system. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. Not my team. Not Calvin. Not even Sam from HR, who had always treated me like a friend. I couldn't afford anyone's sympathy right now. I needed silence. I needed focus. And so I moved through the halls of Silveridge like a ghost. By Wednesday afternoon I'd compiled over 2,000 files. Internal notes dated back 3 years. Early whiteboard sketches scanned and archived. A Slack thread where I'd first proposed the adaptive learning loop. Code commits with timestamps, matching every patent draft. Meeting invites from 2021 where Vincent had skipped half the calls but still called the model his vision during all-hands updates. I backed everything up twice. Once on a private encrypted drive, once on a secure cloud server Serena's team had provided through a burner email. Every file was sorted, labeled, time-stamped, watermarked. No narrative. No opinion. Just the truth, clean and surgical. It felt like preparing for court. Or war. Thursday Vincent passed by my new desk. A small open cubicle outside the DevOps bullpen, far from the glass offices I once walked through like I belonged there. He stopped. Just for a moment. How are you settling in? He asked casually. I looked up from my screen. Just fine, I said with a small smile. He scanned my face for signs of rebellion. Found none. And walked away. But his eyes lingered. And that told me everything I needed to know. He was worried. He didn't understand why I wasn't angry. Why I wasn't making noise. He expected a confrontation. Instead I gave him nothing. And that silence was deafening. Later that day I passed Jennifer from the marketing team by the elevator. Hey, she said gently, I heard about the reassignment. I just wanted to say, this place wouldn't run without you. It's bullshit. I nodded, grateful but guarded. Thanks, I said. But sometimes a quieter position lets you think a little more clearly. She gave me a puzzled look but didn't push. Back at my desk I opened the final folder. The patent application. Drafted last year. Lead author, Marisol Vega. With 2 supporting engineers listed. Vincent's name was nowhere near it, because he'd been in Dubai at the time, pitching to investors while I worked overnight in my apartment on a whiteboard that still had ink stains on the wall. I took one last look through the file. Saved it. Uploaded it. And with that, the full archive was complete. That evening, Serena called. Our team reviewed everything, she said. It's airtight. There's no ambiguity here. I wasn't trying to build a case, I told her. Just documenting what happened. She paused, then replied, Marisol, what you've built, the system and the paper trail, it doesn't just document the truth. It defines it. She sent over the final investment term sheet for my review. I opened it and read every line. $12 million in capital. Contingent on a board-appointed CTO role. Non-negotiable governance clause. Equity. Oversight. Protection. Named Marisol Vega. For a long moment I just stared at it. Then I closed the file, locked my screen and left the office without saying a word. Because tomorrow Vincent would see it too. And nothing would ever be the same. Friday afternoon. The conference room was packed, not just with people but with tension so thick it could have been bottled. Vincent had called an emergency leadership meeting with barely an hour's notice. The subject line of the invite said simply, Investment terms, immediate review. I arrived exactly on time, as did Jennifer from marketing, David from ops, and the heads of product, infrastructure and client success. Even Calvin showed up, clearly confused about why a mid-level manager had suddenly been looped into executive talks. Vincent stood at the front of the room, fingers drumming the edge of the table. His suit was perfect, but his expression was off. He looked like someone trying to hold a door shut against an oncoming storm. Let's keep this brief, he said, flipping open a manila folder as we all settled into our seats. We've received the term sheet from Meridian Capital. $12 million in Series B funding. Overall, favorable terms. He said it with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a parking citation. But, he continued, they've included several structural stipulations. The room went still. He turned to the whiteboard and began writing bullet points in all caps like they were a list of chores, not the conditions that could change the company. New C-level position. C. Direct report to board. Equity compensation structure. Technical strategy separation from C. No one spoke. You could feel everyone trying to translate what this actually meant. Jennifer tilted her head. So, the CTO wouldn't report to you? Vincent forced a smile. Correct. They're requesting technical leadership report directly to the board for transparency. David frowned. But we've always structured technical under product under executive. This is different. It's not uncommon in high-tech venture structuring, I said evenly. Especially when the investors suspect the CEO doesn't have domain expertise. I said it without venom. Just information. Vincent turned to me slowly. I met his gaze without blinking. And who do they expect to fill this CTO role? Asked Calvin. Vincent didn't answer. Because he knew we all knew. There was only one person who matched the job description who could walk into a board meeting and explain every aspect of the system from the ground up, including the math behind the optimization layer and the compression logic on the deployment tier. Me. The room remained quiet, waiting. Then Vincent exhaled, looked down and muttered, They've asked for Marisol. He tried to say it like it was just another decision. Just another hire. But no one missed the way his jaw locked on my name. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I simply nodded, professional and calm, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Because to me it was. Jennifer glanced at me with barely concealed satisfaction. David gave the smallest nod of approval as if to say finally. I watched Vincent absorb the shift in the room. The way he suddenly wasn't the sole axis anymore. The way people were recalibrating their gaze, not toward him but toward me. We'll need to discuss next steps, he said stiffly. Privately. Of course, I said. I'm available whenever you're ready. And with that, the meeting ended. People filed out quietly but not quickly. The energy in the room had changed. Permanently. I could feel it in their glances, in the way Jennifer lingered near me a second longer than necessary. They saw what was happening. Vincent had drawn the map. But I had become the compass. Monday morning came with unusual quiet. The office, normally buzzing by 9, felt subdued. I suspected word had spread about the term sheet, and more importantly about me. You could always feel it when the center of gravity shifted. People watched differently, whispered more, Held eye contact just a second too long. At 9:01 sharp my email pinged. Subject: Strategy Discussion. From Vincent Archer. Message: Please stop by my office this morning. I'd like to discuss the new org structure. V. No anger. No urgency. Just clean, professional lines. The digital version of a white flag. I walked down the hall, heels clicking softly on the concrete floor, aware of how silent everything seemed around me. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. But I knew they were listening. Vincent's office was just as I remembered it. Wood-paneled floor-to-ceiling windows and sterile as ever. The awards on his shelf hadn't changed. But he had. He looked tired. Not messy, he'd never allow that, but hollow around the eyes. Like someone who hadn't slept, not because he was working, but because something was slipping and he couldn't stop it. Marisol, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Thanks for coming. I sat. Crossed my legs. Said nothing. He cleared his throat, folded his hands. I've been thinking a lot about the feedback from Meridian. And about the best structure for us moving forward. I tilted my head slightly. You mean the structure they're requiring? His jaw twitched just barely. Let's call it collaborative evolution. I almost laughed. But I didn't. That was the thing about Vincent. Even in retreat he was trying to control the frame. I wanted to extend the offer to you personally, he continued. We'll be creating the Chief Technology Officer role per the term sheet. You'd be reporting to the board and compensated accordingly. It's a significant promotion. You're not offering it to me, I said calmly. They are. He blinked. Once. I'm still the CEO, Marisol. For now, I said, letting the words hang there, not as a threat, just as fact. He sat back slowly, like he'd just felt the edge of something sharp behind him. I just want us to work together again, he said. We've always made a good team. Vincent, I worked. You presented. I smiled gently. That's not a team. That's marketing. His eyes narrowed, but only slightly. I wasn't giving him anything to fight. He reached for a folder on the desk, the same one he'd used to demote me a week ago. But this time it was heavier. Inside, the new contract. I opened it slowly. Title: Chief Technology Officer. Reporting: Direct to Board of Directors. Equity stake: 2.5%. Base salary: $240,000. Termination clause: cause only, board oversight required. It was everything Serena promised and more. A complete reversal of the demotion and then some. My role wasn't just restored. It was elevated. Protected. Permanent. I closed the folder gently and looked up at him. What changed? I asked, even though I already knew. He straightened his tie. The investors made it clear that your expertise is critical. That word again. Critical. Not valued. Not respected. Just necessary. And I'd take that. Because necessary has power. Then I accept, I said. And I look forward to setting technical strategy independently. He nodded just once stiffly. Oh, I added as I rose. And this time don't worry. I'll handle the investor presentations too. I walked out without looking back. Because the next time someone asked who built the future of Silveridge, the answer wouldn't be a question. It would be my name. That afternoon the entire senior team gathered in the big conference room. The one with the panoramic view of the river and the wall-sized screen that never quite worked right. I'd sat through dozens of meetings here. Strategy reviews. Budget brawls. All hands where Vincent announced victories built on other people's labor. But today the room was quiet. Expectant. Everyone had heard. No one had seen. Vincent stood at the front again like always. But this time he wasn't glowing. He wasn't grand. Just present. Neutral. Maybe even relieved. Thanks for making time, he said, looking around. As many of you know, we've finalized the terms with Meridian Capital. The Series B funding is secured. Polite applause rippled across the room. Brief. Controlled. Vincent continued. As part of that agreement, and in recognition of the growing technical demands of our platform, we're announcing a new role on the executive team, Chief Technology Officer. He paused. Swallowed. And I'm pleased to share that the role will be filled by Marisol Vega. The applause that followed wasn't just louder, it was real. Jennifer beamed. David smiled, wide and without hesitation. Even Calvin looked up from his laptop and nodded like the universe had finally aligned. I stood slowly, calm but certain, and moved to the front of the room. Vincent stepped back half a pace. I took his place, not by force but by gravity. "I'll keep this short," I said, meeting the eyes of every person who had ever come to me for clarity when no one else would give it. "I've been building systems here for 6 years. It's time we build the company the same way, with clarity, accountability, and data that reflects reality." A quiet hum of approval moved through the room. "I'm honored to take this role," I said. "Not because of a title but because now I get to protect what we've built. And make sure it grows the right way." There were no fireworks. No standing ovation. Just something better. Quiet, unshakable respect. Vincent nodded once and I nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even reconciliation. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. After the meeting, Serena joined via video call from New York, formally welcoming me in front of the board. She said the words with all her usual elegance, but when our eyes met through the screen, she gave me the smallest smile. "A private message in public view. You did this." And I had. In the weeks that followed, things at Silveridge began to shift. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But with the slow, irreversible weight of gravity. Vincent still had the title of CEO. But something in him had deflated. Meetings that once centered around him now moved around me. People watched me when technical strategy was discussed. They quoted my numbers in client calls. The investors? They looped me in directly. Every single time. He started missing check-ins. Arriving late to presentations. Delegating decisions he used to obsess over. Like a man who knew the ground was soft beneath his feet, and sinking. Eventually, the board called a special session. They framed it in polite terms, evaluating leadership alignment. But no one missed the subtext. 3 weeks later, Vincent quietly announced he'd be transitioning out of day-to-day operations. No press release. No farewell party. Just a short memo, a vague thank you note, and an office left half empty by the end of the month. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak ill of him. I didn't need to. He had taught me everything I needed to know. About power, about erasure, and about what happens when you underestimate the person doing the real work behind the curtain. Under my direction, we hired 5 new engineers in the first quarter. We restructured DevOps. Rebuilt the forecast pipeline. Launched a second product vertical focused on non-financial analytics. Something I'd proposed years ago but had been told wasn't part of the vision. Now it was the vision. Serena's team upped their investment 2 months in. Impressed by the traction we'd built in half the time. One of her junior analysts told me quietly during a strategy call, "You made this place make sense." That one stayed with me. Sometimes I still sat at my desk late after everyone had left. The same codebase on my monitor. The same interface I'd watched grow line by line. But it felt different now. It wasn't just mine. It was ours. Because now I could protect it. Shape it. Scale it. Let it. One night I walked past the office where Vincent used to sit. Now empty, the blinds pulled down, the light off. I stood there for a moment. And then I kept walking. Because revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own footsteps. Heading toward something better.